You are listening to the Go Get Them show. This is a discussion that inspires entrepreneurs to pursue their passion to create meaningful, impactful, and sustainable companies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. This is your host, Arun Krishnakumar, together with my co hosts, Maxon T and Sheila Mburu. We sit down with entrepreneurs, operators, and investors across frontier markets to discover their experiences, lessons learned, and how they make an impact so you can too.
More limitations in the way that we conduct businesses, definitely. And at the same time, I've been seeing.
I think on one side, a lot of opportunity to be tapped, and I think more importantly, a lot of impact that could be made in the societies. That's, I think, the most important thing.
Hello, everyone. Today, for this episode of Go Get Them, we have Dima Djani. Dima Djani is the CEO of Alami, the world's first Sharia challenger bank based in Indonesia, home to the largest Muslim population in the world. About 230 million people live there. Alami was started in 2019 as a Sharia-compliant peer-to-peer lending platform for SME financing. To date, they have disbursed about $100 million across 3,200 transactions with zero default rate. Alami has also been awarded as the best Islamic P2P lending platform in 2020 by the Asset Tribe A and World Islamic Finance Awards by far. Dima started his career as a banker in Citibank. After 6 years there, he moved to SocGen, where he was into banking, focused on deals in energy, renewables, and infrastructure. And in 2018, August of 2018, he became the CEO of Alami, and he is now he's going through the process of revolutionizing the Sharia financial industry through technology, Fintech technology. Dima holds an MBA from INSEAD and a Bachelor's of Business Management, Entrepreneurship, and Entrepreneurial Studies from RMIT University. Dima, thanks for making time and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure to be in this panel with you, Art.
Great. So maybe let's just quickly start with a warm-up question to your career. After 7-8 years or 6 years at Citi and then with SocGen, largely within investment banking, what kind of triggered your career move into Alami, and what was the aha moment for you to say, okay, this is an opportunity and I need to address this market of Sharia folks?
Oh, sure. I think it has multi reasons on the triggers that I finally started Alami. I think the first one is I joined the banking bandwagon right after the Lehman Brothers collapse, right? So I joined Citi in the corporate investment banking division in Indonesia, also doing the secondment to Hong Kong to cover the Asia Pacific market as well. But to my understanding, like the banking world shifted dramatically after the global financial crisis back in 2008. So I feel like there are obviously more limitations in the way that we conduct businesses, definitely. And at the same time, I've been seeing upward trends on tech startup and especially on the fintech side, because I've learned that there's a lot of inefficiencies even in the bulge bracket banks, right? And I was thinking, I bet the national banks or even the regional or rural banks in emerging markets must have had a lot of limitations that simple technological solution can actually help them. So that's kind of like the sparks of the idea behind Alami first. So we first started off as an aggregator actually for SME lending, but then we pivoted a little bit to a full-blown peer-to-peer lending platform. And with regards to the Sharia compliance, I think this is a space that nobody had really taken it like seriously over the last 30 to 50 years. It's very much underrepresented, whereas the opportunity is significant. I mean, Muslim globally represent about 25% of world population, and in a country like Indonesia, like we have 80% plus Muslim that represent around 230 million Muslims in Indonesia. And at the same time, the Islamic banking penetration in terms of the assets is still very limited. It's about 5 to 6%. So then I was trying to think like, how can this be possible? Because Malaysia has about 30% of Islamic banking penetration. Saudi has, I think it's about 50%, and UAE is about 25%. And why Indonesia is so lag behind? So I'm trying to think of various reasons why this is the case. And basically, it's just a matter of there's no proper infrastructure and technology as well as manpower good enough to develop this industry, while at the same time the demand from the market is kept on increasing year on year. So the supply from the players couldn't keep up with the trends, and things that affecting the trends from the market is basically social media and the power of internet. A long time ago, people when they're trying to learn something, obviously they need to have a guru or an ustad or a cleric to understand about the message. And now it's freely accessible from platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and etc. And there's a new wave of modern clerics that teaches in a way that it's very easy to comprehend and very related to daily activities. Uh, so that's why we're seeing the halal economy in Indonesia been flourishing over the last 5 years, be it from the modest fashion, halal food, halal travel, the Umrah trips pre-COVID keep on increasing year on year. And when it comes to finance, obviously there are two issues. One is the financial literacy is still very much limited in Indonesia, and the government is trying to increase it. And the second is, of course, the readiness of the players, because when we're talking about banking, we understand there's legacy issues, right? So when the banks are run in a less efficient, less effective way, obviously the legacy issue becomes a very big burden. So this is where we see that there's a clear opportunity for us, fintech, a Sharia compliant fintech, to kind of like tackle this market and trying to fill the gap that's growing year on year. And hence, that's why our traction has been very good, very positive, and the engagement rate is very, very high compared to some of the other players out there.
Thanks for that, Dima. And you mentioned that your banking career started after the Lehman crisis. In some sense, it kind of coincides with the almost the takeoff of the Sharia finance space, Islamic finance space, because post 2008, people were looking for sustainable financial products. And can you tell explain a little bit to our audience about why Sharia fintech, Sharia finance is sustainable? What are the common broad strokes of the principles of the finance, that particular part of the industry?
Sure. I think when people mention about Sharia finance, then immediately they will think about no riba, right? Or no interest. There's no usury and everything. It's actually far bigger than that, right? There's also no gray area, like what they call gharar. There's no gambling. There's no maisir and all of these things. So essentially, under the Sharia concept, and this is just from my understanding about the Sharia financial concept, is that the whole financial industry is just to support and facilitate the real industry, meaning that all the financial transaction needs to directly link to either a product or a service that is provided in the market. It shouldn't be decoupled from the real economy. I mean, the crisis, for example, in GFC back in 2008, is one of the factors, obviously, is that the decoupled of the real economy and the financial economy. So when there's like a little bit of a downtrend movement on the real economy, then the leverage is already too high. So I think this is why like the Sharia finance trying to promote sustainability, as well as good corporate governance and everything. That's something that is might not grow that fast vis-a-vis like the mainstream kind of finance or economy, but then sustainably it's better. And the second thing is the ultimate objective of the Sharia finance, as opposed to kind of like the mainstream one as we know it, is not really profit maximization, but more on wealth equality, which means that every like in Islam, it is not shunned to be very rich, but as long as you use that money and return it back to the society, right? So there's this concept of social finance that is deeply integrated with the commercial elements of that finance. So like the zakat, the wakaf and the sadaqah and all different forms of social finance to redistribute the money back into the community and bring balances, so the inequality gap will not grow as big, and it's actually helping the inequality to be narrower. So that's kind of like the broad concepts of this area of finance.
Thank you so much. That's so good to think about the concepts of finance as an equalizer rather than just a money making engine. Um, One other question I have for you: we briefly touched upon riba, which is interest that is kind of generally avoided as part of this ecosystem. So you are running a P2P lending platform. So how have you thought about this product ground up? I'm sure you've thought about the structure of it and the way you've gone about it to make it sustainable and compliant to Sharia principles. So can you tell us a little bit about that on how you're doing it with Alami?
Yeah. So there are also many different understanding of this riba, right? Like for example, like a long time ago, 1,400 years ago, when people give money and the interest rate would be like double or triple and everything. Obviously, right now it's way less than that, but then the concept still remains and hence still prohibited. So the way we structure it, we have several mechanics depending on the products. So for the invoice financing product that we have, typically the lenders, instead of getting an interest income, he or she will be getting a commission based on kind of the factoring service that he or she provides as part of the crowd lending. There's being POA to us as a platform. So meaning that this commission will not change. So even if there's like late payment and everything, there would not be a concept of compounding interest, for example. So we think that it's fair because we kind of screen the borrowers accordingly, and we make sure to do our best, what do you call it, model that the character is good. So if there's an event of delayed payments, for example, it's not because he wants to delay the payment, but more because he couldn't pay. So it's a bit unethical for us to charge more, like penalty or compounding interest and everything to this guy. So that's one structure that we're promulgating. The second one is on the BNPL structure, because BNPL is essentially very Sharia centric, because it's the same with the concept of murabaha, which is uh, pay in installment basically. So we do this in a productive way though. So we're trying to avoid consumerism, which is being propelled also by some of the BNPL players. We're focusing on productive BNPL, so we're targeting farmers. The farmers would need to buy their stocks, their seeds. For some of the fish farmers, their fish feeds. So we're buying that and we sell it to them on installment basis, and they will repay us after they do the harvest. So in this case, we can combat the kind of like loan sharks in that village through technology with significant competitive pricings compared to what the loan sharks are offering. So these are the two kind of like loan products that is accustomed to the Sharia compliance principles.
Great. And when I first read your introduction, I spoke about the amount of money that you lent as a platform, about 100 million over 3,200 loans and 0% default rates. Would you attribute that 0% default rates to Sharia principles, or is it
Um,
largely your process?
Well, yeah, I think indirectly, yes. I mean, directly, it's basically because of the process, like the nature of the loan structure and everything. But I guess indirectly, it's also something that's to do with kind of the Sharia values. Because at the end of the day, what we see that in emerging markets such as Indonesia, a lot of loan defaults is actually happening because of the team's internal fraud, basically, like in some of the banks and all of these things. So the culture that we're trying to promote internally within the team is also obviously the Islamic Sharia culture, where people feel responsible not only because of being professional, but more so is there's like kind of like third party watching every time, right? So this kind of like conscious, God conscious value that we would like to promote spirituality. So hence can reduce like almost no numbers of frauds internally. And there's also a fine balance between being aggressive in lending to achieve growth and being prudent. So this is something also that we'd like to maintain and manage. In addition to that, on the fish farmers, we're also uh, in partnership with a digital ecosystem, an IoT company that look after these fish farmers. So we have additional data points for our credit engine to decide.
That's really helpful. Um, One of the things when we always think about Sharia finances, of course, the principles which kind of becomes the risk management policy of the firm in some sense. But what we have found is that in the past, the mainstream products, financial products, have generally yielded better returns than Islamic finance products. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the returns for the people on your platform? I mean, are they comparable to the other P2P lending platforms that are playing in the mainstream business?
Yeah, the returns is comparable. I mean, interestingly, in Indonesia, it's the other way around. So the Sharia instruments is actually higher than the conventional, be it on the time deposit and any other instruments, simply because the risk level is usually higher and the NPL is typically higher as well. So for us, we're trying to switch that trend. So actually, our pricing is more competitive compared to the mainstream ones. Hence, the returns to the lenders might also be a little bit smaller than the comparables. Having said that, our returns is the highest in terms of the fixed income instrument, like Sharia compliant fixed income instruments in Indonesia. We offer the highest returns. It's per annum, it's about 14 to 15% in IDR terms, whereas some of other players offering around 17 to 18%. So it's only about 2 to 3% differences, and I think people are still liking ours because of the ability to manage the NPL, as well as the Sharia values, which is like not many platforms offering that. Our retention rate is actually above 70% on month basis. We do the cohort analysis, so it's quite interesting to see the stickiness and a growing cohorts on monthly basis on our platform.
That's great to hear. So one other point I wanted to discuss with you is the investment horizon or the investment appetite for from mainstream VCs into Sharia fintech. I have been part of the Sharia fintech journey that yielders in the UK have been taking. I'm sure you've been following the firm through Abdul and Harris as well. Pretty close to that space here. And one thing we've all discussed several times was the lack of capital that is flowing into Sharia fintech companies. Definitely in this part of the world, they're considered niche even by the mainstream fintech VCs here. But I know that there is, I mean, from your, at least your cap table, I know Kona Capital are there, one of the investors across the world that I admire a lot, and you managed to get them on board. I'm sure you have several other amazing investors. So, what have you done as an organization to attract that kind of capital? What should the broader Islamic fintech, Sharia fintech ecosystem learn from you while they are going out there to raise capital from mainstream VCs?
Yeah, sure. That's a very interesting question. And this is the issue that we're all facing in the market globally, as you mentioned. I think the difference between the players in the UK market and Indonesia is obviously the market size is totally different, right? So I guess that's also definitely an element of that. But then the question is obviously even the mainstream finance hasn't really fully utilized the market, and now there's an Islamic one which is a niche. And it's been growing, and why would the VC are interested to come, right? So it's not an easy process. I mean, we've been trying to educate the VCs in this market for some time now. And we obviously have early believers. First institutional VCs that came to us is Stripe Group from Singapore, followed by Golden Gate Ventures, that is quite active in Singapore and Silicon Valley as well. So I think obviously it is an ongoing education. Obviously now we're planning to raise Series B next year. It's also an education on validating the market to growth funds. That's kind of like heavy on emerging markets, including Indonesia right now. So I think the way that I try to position the business and to communicate with the VCs would be coming from we're using the same language basically because of my experience in investment banking. So that helps a lot because in Indonesia in particular, I can't really say for other markets, the understanding of fundraising is still very limited. The way they communicate to mainstream investors is also different. They would say things that not the mainstream investor not necessarily want to hear, like obviously the spirituality and everything. So that would be like, you know, um, it's a moot point for that. So trying to position it in a way that Islamic finance will forever be decoupled from mainstream finance. So mainstream finance will grow, Islamic finance will grow. There will not be a crisscross because it's definitely a concept that is against kind of each other because obviously one has the usury and one's not, something like that. The question is just then how big is the market, right? How big is the market? And second is there like any how likely the Muslims to utilize the Islamic finance rather than just use the conventional finance, and that something has to do with literacy definitely. And can the mainstream players can easily branch out to the Sharia space, right? So for example, we know Klarna is big, right? Or Revolut, and suddenly there's a Revolut Sharia. How easy that is, right? And how people would accept that in a market, right? So these are the questions that an investor would ask, right? In a market like Indonesia, we've seen several cases that it's very hard for a mainstream company to go into Sharia simply because the literacy has been improved over the last couple of years, and people are now, especially in urbans, are smarter to see like if they cross into Sharia, like what would be their motivation. If it's only for the market, people will be have the antipathy to that mission, right? But if it's like solely Sharia focusing, like us, for example, that we get a lot of sympathy from the Muslims in the market as well. So that creating kind of a shield and a distinct positioning that's quite unique for investor to come in actually, because we know the market, we can reach out to different communities, and it's very community-led kind of approach here in Indonesia as well. So it's very difficult for big mainstream player just burning money to get into the communities, because these people they're actually concerned about the identity.
Thanks for that. Extremely helpful insights there. In terms of your next steps as an organization, you've of course been a leader within this space in Indonesia. Do you have any expansion plans to the western part of the world? Europe is the fastest growing Muslim community in the world at the moment. Of course, the size is not as big as you would want on the market size, but it's still pretty big. Are you thinking of expanding your organization?
Yes, in terms of the business model, we acquired a Sharia bank, a small Sharia bank, and we want to turn it into a digital Islamic bank in the country, in Indonesia. So that will be like our next plan in terms of our strategy, and we're have everything ready. We're just now waiting for the regulatory clearance to launch that. In terms of the geographical expansion, we're still going to be very much focusing on Indonesian market. However, we found some interesting use cases in Middle East as well. So we're in discussion with a few parties on that. And in terms of UK, I understand that from the academic perspective, it's kind of like leading right now, because it's a place that can easily merge the concept of the economics and also the Sharia finance, right? We actually have a team member in UK. He's a PhD in Lancaster University. So we're creating the kind of Alami Institute as well to do a think tank to develop the concept of Sharia finance, particularly in Indonesia, learning from a more developed market in terms of the way of thinking. So this is something that we're trying to do. As you know, like the fintech has gone so far. Like we're talking about NFT, obviously on crypto, and we're going into the Web 3.0 and all of these things, right? So I think it's important for Muslims all around the world, and particularly in our market in Indonesia, to understand these things, because the leading Muamalah scholars here still talking about the e-commerce related type of transaction. It hasn't gone that far into like crypto or NFT and any other applications made for it. So we were hoping that this Alami Institute can be a spearhead on this, working with some of the leading talents in the UK as well as locally in Indonesia.
Great. I mean, I was going to ask you this question, which is, do you see people of other cultures and beliefs taking part in the Sharia fintech growth in the future? And you kind of addressed part of it, which is first Sharia fintech and the participants of this ecosystem will themselves need to understand the futuristic elements of finance like cryptos and NFTs, and show that they are current in the way they are looking at products and returns. But there's also another angle to it, which is, okay, so this is, I'm making sure there is awareness and financial literacy within this space, but also how do I bring others outside of this cultural setup, the community setup, into the community? Are you thinking on those lines? Do you think that is a possibility? Is there possibility of others embracing this field of finance?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the concept of Sharia finance, I mean, is just a financial transactions or activities that's being run within the corridor, right, of Sharia, which means that it's open for everyone. I mean, this corridor exists to prevent crisis, actually. So this is something that's applicable for everyone, and I think we're inviting people to partake in this. But the tricky part is when people participate in this Sharia finance, this person needs to really understand, obviously, the values and the principles. If they're on board with the vision and how to run these things, that's definitely great. But then I see like a lot of people only looking Muslim as a market, right? So this is where the potential biasness in terms of the business execution would be, because otherwise it would be the same with non-Sharia finance, right? Just using that as a cover. So I think this is where people should draw the fine line and just move with it.
That's great, and I think with that, and with that broader note on bringing more people into this ecosystem, I'm glad to have had this conversation. I certainly learned a lot. I've taken some notes as well. So thanks very much for your insights and your inputs. And I wish you all the best for your digital banking endeavors and your expansion strategies. And I really look forward to that, the initiative where you talked about Alami Institute. Love to catch up with your guy in the UK if he's available as well for a conversation at some point. So
Sure.
thanks so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you, Aaron, for having us.
Cheers.